Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today's true crime case that I'll be talking about will be the murder of Breck Bednar. Breck's killer was actually known by the media as Babyface Killer, and you'll find out why a little later on. I do feel like this is a really important case for young people, to let them know the dangers that are out there in the world, and especially with online predators. I'd just like to give my disclaimer. I mean, no disrespect to anyone I'm going to talk about today. All I've done is gathered the information from the internet, collated it into a video for educational purposes. So Breck David Lefebvre Bednar was a 14-year-old boy. He lived with his mother Lauren Lefebvre and his father Barry Bednar, along with his younger siblings that were actually triplets. And they all lived in Caterham in Surrey, England. Originally his parents were actually from America, but they did decide to move to the UK 3 years before Breck was even born. They felt like it was a safer place to live, obviously without the gun crime and things like that. And when Breck was 7, his parents actually decided to split up. Now his father moved out of the family home, leaving his mother with the children, but he did have a very active life in home. He visited all the time. He still was really involved in his family, basically. Breck was always smiling and friendly. He was also very intelligent and he always got top grades. Breck was just a really warm-hearted, kind soul. He was really interested in games, computers, things like coding. He used to always apparently take apart his technology, put it back together. He loved seeing how things work and the intricate details in it, and then obviously putting it all back together. And this was his passion, really. At around the age of 13, Breck actually began online gaming, which is where you can talk to your friends in real time, or even strangers, people you don't know. You can all play online together, you can speak to each other through a headset, and this can be from around the world, basically. And gaming at the time was quite a popular hobby. I mean, like it is now, Fortnite, for example. It was really sort of picking up speed, especially with young boys. His family was really religious and they went to church a lot, and in his church, the church decided to make a group for gaming. So there were 6 boys who entered this group and Breck was one of them. And this meant that they could all chat together and game together online and just enjoy themselves, basically. The 6 boys got together and decided which server they were going to play on, and they picked one who was owned by an older boy called Lewis Danes. For those of you who don't know what a server is basically a service that allows you to run a game. Usually it's multiplayer and the host has kind of control over everything, but they can put passwords on it, they can allow people to play on it, they can invite their friends. It just hosts a certain game, whatever game they choose to host. So the 6 began gaming online. Lewis actually also joined in. He owned the server, like I said. So he decided to get in with this group of friends and he would play with them pretty much every night, and they did start to see him as a friend. Now Lewis was actually 18, so the boys kind of saw him as, in a sense, like an older brother. And Lewis told him that he was part of the Secret Service, that he was a multimillionaire, that he had all these companies, and he was basically rich. He told them that he used to live in New York and things like that, a whole host of things. I mean, these boys were young, and Lewis started out with small lies at first. Things that weren't totally out there to make the boys not believe it from the start. So in doing this, starting with the small lies, he then built on it, and then the boys just kind of believed pretty much everything he said. So Breck began gaming quite a lot, as young boys would, but it didn't really interfere with his life. He still attended his air training corps, he still did his homework, he still had top-end grades. Like I said, he was a very intelligent boy. It didn't affect his life. So his parents didn't see the harm in it. Lauren used to come into the room while he was gaming, and she used to say hello, and the boys would always have a warm greeting for her. But she did start to get a bit suspicious of one of the group members because he seemed to have a deeper voice than the others. And again, she went to the church. She knew the 6 boys that were in the group, the 5 boys, sorry, that were in the group, and she didn't really recognise this one. So she did get a bit suspicious as to who this guy was. She questioned Breck, who is this guy, and Breck showed her his avatar picture. And this picture was of quite a young, attractive lad. So she said, Breck, is that really him? How do you know that's really him? So he said, oh, it's not, it's just an avatar picture, because he's in the Secret Service and he can't show his picture to anyone. And obviously his mum told him that this was a complete lie. But all the group believed him. They believed that he was a multi-millionaire, part of the Secret Service, because he'd spun these lies to them, and they thought it was true. And of course, I'm sure you've guessed it by now, Lewis wasn't a member of the Secret Service, and he wasn't a millionaire. He was an 18-year-old guy who lived in a flat on his own in Essex. He was unemployed, and he was basically grooming these boys. So obviously the boys did get close to him, and Breck was the one that got the closest. Breck would talk about his computing, his programming, obviously what he was super interested in, his passion. And then Lewis came up with that one of his companies actually specialised in programming. And when he was old enough, he would offer him a job, a 6-figure salary to work for him, and Breck believed him. They all did. Now, Lewis had actually done this before. There was a boy of 13, around 13 I believe, from America, who Lewis had basically befriended. He had tried to get him to actually travel to England from America on his own to stay with Lewis as a friend. He basically begged him. So this young lad even went as far as to do a PowerPoint presentation as to why they should let him go to England. That's how kind of brainwashed and how much Lewis had got under his skin he was. Obviously his parents said, don't be ridiculous, you are not travelling all that way on your own to a stranger you don't know. So obviously he couldn't go. So Lewis dropped that straight away, and then he moved on to Breck. As I said previously, Breck was still really well behaved. He was such a good boy, but it seemed to change in the summer of 2013. Breck stopped going to his hobbies. He stopped going to church as much. His work started slacking in school and things like that. As I said, he was a top grade student. Not only that, his home life slacked. He started being untidy and wouldn't tidy his room and a bit disobedient in a sense. His mum started to get worried, which obviously you would. That wasn't like Breck, that wasn't her son. So why was he acting like this all of a sudden? And she did actually put it down to Lewis, the older boy that he was playing games with. She thought he maybe was a bad influence on him. And now, as I said before, when she entered the room, she'd get a really warm greeting. Now, nothing. Something changed. She got ignored. Whenever she popped in, he didn't want her there. So a relationship really with her son was deteriorating around her. And she was getting that worried about him that she actually rang the police. And slowly but surely, the other members of the groups began to become suspicious of Lewis. They asked for pictures of him, to go into a video chat with him, to which he always came up with an excuse. They even arranged to meet up with Lewis, but he always came up with a reason as to why he couldn't. He also didn't have a social media account, which was strange in itself because at the time pretty much everyone has them. I know not everybody does, but mostly the majority of people do have them. And he began to become very possessive over Breck. When his friends would join the channel, Lewis would kick them out, just so it would be Breck and himself. And simply because they were so young, they didn't really think much of it. In their eyes, they thought that Lewis was just trying to steal their friend, not that there was actually any danger to it. Some of them did grow tired of Lewis and kind of broke free of his spell, whereas others, such as Breck, were completely intertwined within it.
James was changing all of his ideology, and Breck would use specific phrases all the time. Well, Lewis says, I don't believe in God, so why should I have to go to church? Lewis says, I don't make any messes, so why should I have to clean up? Lewis says, I can get a Microsoft apprenticeship through him, and so I won't have to finish school. And I always had this preface that Lewis said.
So now we're in December of 2013, and Breck and Lewis have been friends for over a year now, and things were getting worse. So Breck agreed to let Lauren do a chat with Lewis to get an idea of the kind of person that he was. Her son was spending so much time with him. She wanted to know why her son had changed and to get a feel for Lewis. And this conversation basically ended in Lewis telling her how to parent her own son. And the sheer audacity, I just couldn't believe that he would try and give her ideas on how to raise a son. It's ridiculous. Lauren knew basically that she had to get her son away from Lewis. He was definitely not a good influence, and she really, really didn't like who her son was becoming. and Breck was too brainwashed to listen to her. She decided to take away his technology. What else could she do? He was communicating with Lewis online and gaming and things like that. The only way that she could stop that was to take away his technology. But Lewis was one step ahead. Lewis actually bought Breck a mobile phone and he mailed it to him. And this allowed Breck to continue talking with Lewis even while his technology had gone. But his mother obviously didn't know. And that's how bad things were getting. The fact that Lewis actually bought him a mobile so that he could still talk to him, it's just unbelievable. He was so obsessed with Breck and so possessive over him that he needed to be in contact with him at all times. Lauren kind of called together a parents' meeting in a sense with all of the kids and their parents to voice her concerns about Lewis and see whether anyone agreed with her. Now, other parents did agree with her and she felt like they were on her side about it. Little did she know that Lewis had convinced Breck to record the entire conversation and then send it back to him. So Lewis knew exactly what was said about him in that entire thing. Breck was just that brainwashed. He didn't see anything wrong with it, he just did it. So after a few days, his mother obviously gave him back his technology. Can't keep it away from mum for that long, really. Obviously it was his passion, it was what he enjoyed doing. If you don't give it him back, then maybe they start resenting you. It's just such a hard situation. But she did give it him back with conditions that basically he wasn't allowed to talk to Lewis at all. And he had to find a new server to do his gaming on, playing his games on. And Breck agreed to these terms because obviously he would have done, he wanted his technology back. And it did seem to work. It seemed like she was getting her son back. Lauren thought she'd cracked it. She'd got rid of Lewis and Breck was returning to normal. But this wasn't the case. Instead of openly talking to Lewis, Breck was now secretly talking to Lewis under the radar, and Lauren didn't know. And because things were getting better, Lauren kind of forgot about the call she'd made to the police. She wanted a police investigation into this. She never really rehashed that, and as it turns out, the police never did anything about it. So it would have taken them a mere couple of seconds, minutes even, to input Lewis's name into the system. And they would have actually found that Lewis was a dangerous guy. And things could have just been so different for Breck Bednar. So Lewis had previous allegations of rape for a 15-year-old boy. And he had indecent images of children on his computer. How the police didn't bother even looking into this just infuriates me, because if they would have just typed his name in, they would have seen how dangerous he could have been. And with him talking to Breck, they would have obviously done something. And Breck would have been safe with his family instead of me sat here telling you guys about his case. And it really, really saddens me thinking about what could have happened opposed to what actually did happen. Lauren, like I said, thought she got son back. She thought Lewis was gone. It was history. Breck had cut Lewis out of his life, right? Wrong. Lewis was still filling Breck's head with lies, and he believed every single one of them. And when it got to 2014, Lewis came up with the biggest lie he'd ever made to Breck. He basically told Breck that he was dying, and he didn't know who to give his wealth to. His multi-million companies, the programming company that obviously Breck had been promised a job in. He just didn't know what to do with it. And he told him that he only had a few months to live. He then told him that he wanted to give all of this wealth to Breck, a 14-year-old boy that he loosely knew online. And Breck believed him. Why wouldn't you? Breck was so brainwashed, and he saw Lewis as this great older guy who was treating him right, he was giving him all this stuff. Breck would have been a millionaire at the age of 14. He was just convinced that everything Lewis was saying was true. In February the same year, Breck's school went on a trip to Spain for a week. And Breck really enjoyed himself. He even got a girlfriend while he was there, his first girlfriend. He was so elated, he was so happy at getting this first girlfriend. And when he came back from the trip, it was his dad's weekend to pick him up, Barry. So Barry met him at the airport with his other children. And even his siblings have said that they've never seen Breck so happy. Like I said, he was just elated at the fact that he'd got this girlfriend.
The triplets said when Breck was in the lift, he was sort of chatting with the girl and just so comfortable. And his brother Sebastian said, "That was the happiest I've ever seen Breck, Mom." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because he had his first girlfriend." And, his little brother noticed how happy he was with his first girlfriend.
But again, the moment he landed, Lewis was back on it. Lewis wanted him to meet him so that he could sign over his wealth. It was the 15th of February when Breck returned home from his trip, and he asked Barry if he could sleep over at a friend's house on the 16th, the following day. Because Breck was always on his computer, and that is how he socialised primarily, the fact that he wanted to go and stay at a friend's kind of face to face, in person, really made Barry very, very happy, like it would any father. Because obviously, if your son usually is stuck on a computer all day, for them to actually get out and go out is just makes you so happy. It's what you want for your own children. So because of this, he obviously agreed. He told him it was a friend from school. Barry didn't see a problem with it. And as you can probably imagine, this wasn't a friend from school. It was Lewis he was going to meet. He'd convinced Breck to lie to his father, and he basically wrote a script out for him, depicting whatever he could say. In response, he made up a whole host of lies for this meeting to actually take place. So the email actually said, "If father asks you where you're going on Sunday, tell him that you're going to meet a friend who's 14. His name is Edward Bly. He's invited you over to his dad's house for the day while his dad's visiting Caterham. And Edward Bly's father also said that you might be able to stay the night depending on the plans." Breck simply thinks that Lewis is being helpful. He's giving him the backstory to enable him to go and stay with him, basically. His father probably wouldn't have let him stay if he knew it was Lewis. Well, he certainly wouldn't. So he gave him this fabricated story that would enable him to go to Lewis's house. And in Lewis's eyes, it was really smart what he'd actually done. He'd fabricated this story and made up all his fake lies, which then wouldn't actually lead back to Lewis. And of course, Breck was so excited. Not only was he going to be rich at the age of 14, he was going to own these companies, he was going to do all this with this programming, which was his passion. Again, he was just super excited and happy to be going to meet Lewis. Who wouldn't be excited about that? On Sunday, the 16th of February 2014, Breck met with Lewis, who was 18 years old, and they had only spoke online before. Now Lewis was prepared. He had a taxi waiting for him at 7 a.m. that he pre-booked the night before to take him from his house to Lewis's flat in Essex. And this journey would have actually nearly taken 2 hours. Now that would have been a very expensive journey, taxi ride. To take him all that way, it would have been in the hundreds probably. This simply added to the charade that he had money to burn, and that this older, cool guy was looking after Breck and had so much to give back to the community, when in fact his motives were anything but pure. Breck arrived at Lewis's, and it seemed for about 6 hours everything was going fine. They were having so much fun, they were chatting, they were gaming, and Breck actually asked if he could stay the night. He was having that much fun. The next morning, on the 17th of February at 11:04 a.m, Essex police received the following phone call.
Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
18-year-old Lewis Danes had murdered 14-year-old Breck Bednar on none other than his mother's birthday. We don't actually know when the tables turned and when it all went wrong, when Lewis became violent, or when he actually murdered Breck, but on the morning he made the phone call, he was so calm and collated.
I got the knife.
Okay.
Can you not interrupt me with this part?
Okay, go on.
Okay. This is being recorded anyway, isn't it?
Yep.
I grabbed the knife and I stabbed him once in the back of the neck, I believe somewhere near the brainstem.
I'm really sorry that I can't play all of this all at once because obviously it's copyrighted, but as you can hear from his voice, he's really calm. It's not like he's just murdered somebody in cold blood. He's eerily confident and speaks with no emotion for the life he's just taken away.
I don't remember exactly what happened, but the fight ended with me cutting his throat. I believe I turned around and I slashed his throat. Look, are the police on their way? I can hear
They
someone.
are.
I'm going to go and do my part. Please, thank you for your help.
Right, just listen.
Police arrive within minutes. They find the murder weapon, a knife, on the hallway floor. Basically, when the police did arrive, they quickly realised that Lewis didn't contact them straight away. He'd had a shower. He'd gathered things into bin bags and left them there full of evidence. In his sink, they found hard drives that were floating in sort of water to try and destroy any evidence that was on them. Obviously, we don't know what was on them. It could have been anything. It could have been he's been caught with child photographs before. Maybe it was those. Maybe he knew that after killing Breck, this would just add on to his sentence in a sense, so he just wanted to get rid of them. We don't actually know what was on these, but again, he didn't just call the police as soon as he'd done it. He went and had a shower. And also, in these bags, they found duct tape. When they actually pieced together the duct tape, it perfectly matched as if it had been around Breck's hands and feet. So at some point during the night, he was definitely bound. This means that it was more of a planned murder and not self-defense like Lewis was claiming. There were bloodstains all over the apartment, and there was evidence that he'd tried to clean some of it up. And it kind of looks like halfway through he just gave up. Probably one of the sickest parts of this is that after he had brutally murdered Breck, and just before the police came, he took pictures of Breck's dead body and the murder scene, and he then proceeded to send these to two of Breck's best friends. Now, this absolutely breaks my heart even more. Obviously, at this point, it's devastating that he has murdered Breck. But to then take pictures of the body and send them to his best friends, how must they have felt when they received these pictures? It must have absolutely destroyed them. I bet they were even wondering if it was true, if it was fake. But I myself couldn't imagine at such a young age receiving something like that. It must have traumatised them. And because of this, the news travelled really fast via social media, things like that. And strangers actually knew before his family did. I even read something that one of his sisters received a text asking if it was true about what happened to her brother. And if it was, he was sorry. So that's how they found out that their own brother had died, had been murdered. It's just awful. Lewis was obviously arrested and taken for questioning. And Breck's body was found face down on Lewis's bed with stab wounds to his neck. And due to the positioning of these stab wounds, it would have meant that he would have died very quickly. So whether it hit an artery or the jugular, something like that, would mean that he just bled out so fast. When the police went through his online activities, they found that he had purchased the duct tape online as well as some condoms. So there may have been a sexual element to this attack, which obviously was done for rape before. They also found a semen sample mixed in with the blood that was still wet on the floor. So this means that it wasn't consensual. It was either done while he was bleeding or after he'd already died. Whilst being questioned, he stuck to his story. He'd killed Breck in self-defence. Breck was trying to hurt him and he didn't have a choice. Apparently, according to Lewis, Breck was really depressed that morning that he woke up. He grabbed a penknife off the side and he threatened to hurt himself or Lewis. So naturally, Lewis jumped on him to try and get the knife from him so that he couldn't hurt himself or Lewis. And this really angered Breck. And because of this, Breck then lunged for Lewis, and obviously Lewis thought he was going to kill him. He then stabbed Breck in the neck. Breck then apparently tried to fight him off, which is when he then slashed his throat. Apparently he did try to stop the bleeding, but there was nothing he could do and Breck bled out on his bed. He then got into the shower, contemplated killing himself, but instead decided to call the police and turn himself in. Now, we know for certain Lewis was lying straight away. Like I said, the wound to his neck, it was in such a position, it would have meant Breck would have bled out within minutes, at the most, seconds. Obviously, with that much blood leaving your body at such a fast pace, you feel faint, you start going dizzy, he was basically dying. There was no way he could have been fighting off Lewis and getting back up and trying again, because he just wouldn't have been able to. It would have been impossible. So the story that he stabbed him and then Breck kept coming back for more and then he slit his throat was just utter lies. The first devastating blow was the one that would have killed Breck, and he wouldn't have been able to get up and fight, making Lewis then slit his throat because he was that crazy in a sense. Lewis did plead not guilty to the murder of Breck Bednar, and his trial was set. Like I said in the beginning, Lewis was named as the baby-faced killer by the media. This was because even though he was 18, he looked so young. He looked even younger than Breck Bednar, his victim, who was 14 years old. In 2014, when the trial came around, Lewis had announced his innocence all the way through. He did it in self-defense. He was not guilty of premeditated murder of Breck. And when he stood up in court to give his final plea, what he did shocked everyone. He then pleaded guilty. He had maintained his innocence the entire way through, and now he was pleading guilty. It's widely felt that he did one last act of manipulation and exerting his control over Breck's family before he got put in prison. Everyone knew he was going down. He would have known, surely, that he was going down for murder. So this was one final act against his family. In January 2015, Louis Daines was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 25 years for the murder of Breck Bednar.
No amount of years behind bars will ever change the poisonous attitude and actions of a psychotic animal who can behave this way. No amount of years will bring back the lovely boy taken from us.
A year on, Louis still continued to torment the Bednar family. He made 2 social media posts online from behind bars, and these were full of slanderous things about the murder, about his family, and some of them were just untrue. There's not really been much media coverage about this, and there is a reason for this, because he should have never ever been able to get on social media. Whether he smuggled a phone in, whether he had told someone what he wanted them to write and they did it in his name on the outside, who knows, but it shouldn't have happened in the first place. So obviously the police weren't going to make it a big media thing because it should never have happened. It was illegal. The police obviously know this happened, but obviously they're keeping it under locks for those reasons. Something on their end must have gone wrong for that to happen, and obviously they're not going to want to flaunt that in the media. And secondly, there was a lot of information on it personal to the family that only basically Breck or Lewis would have known. So she did know for this fact, because of this fact, that it was Lewis who had made these posts. Again, they were slanderous and exaggerated by all accounts. Now, I myself haven't actually read these posts. When I did try to search them up, I couldn't actually find them. So whether they have now been removed, which they should have been initially, straight away, I do believe that they were on the internet for quite a while so that anybody could see them. I've seen other people who've done a video on Breck who have actually found them and talked about them, but I myself couldn't find them, so I don't know whether they are still online or not. And if you guys find them, you know, you're welcome to let me know that they do still exist. But as far as I could see, I think they've been taken down. Even with Breck so cruelly, tragically dragged from this world, his family are still being taunted. His mother Lauren claimed that exactly 5 years, pretty much exactly 5 years after Breck was killed, that one of his sisters, who was 17 at the time, started receiving messages through Snapchat. And while she was at school, they were messaging her saying that they would dig up Breck's grave. Lauren actually criticised the police and the social media sites because someone was trying to scare and harass them, and the last thing that they needed was people online being able to say whatever they wanted. The police said that they couldn't do anything about it because obviously where Snapchat is situated, and they couldn't really do anything. Since Breck Bednar's murder, his family have set up the Breck Foundation, and this enables them to make people aware of online predators. And of course you can donate to this if you want to. Lauren has travelled all over the place giving talks to really try and share Breck's story, to promote good and save lives so that Breck didn't die in vain. The main reasons that I do these videos is to try and spread the word like Lauren is doing. Try and enable young people to identify potential threats. And maybe that could save lives. We just need to spread the word and try and make everybody, as many people as possible, aware of these things, that people online can hide behind a keyboard, they can hide behind a computer, and you never really know who they are, no matter how much they say or make you believe that they're this person. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are. So please, 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 just try and be safe and be careful. and try not to trust anyone you don't know. Breck had his entire life ahead of him. He had so much potential to bring so much to this world. And because of this online predator, this was all taken away from him. And it's just so sad. He was only 14 years old. Anyway guys, that's all I have on the case of Breck Bednar today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!